Okay, I'm going to provide a few tips to help you to be successful in your epidemiological study critical assessment. Use this tool, and this will be your critique form. So, as you can see, the rubric is actually embedded within the form itself, so this is for your success. You will fill out this form as you're completing the assignment. So, we're taking a step back, examining what you've learned so far, putting that into action by critiquing a quantitative study. So you want to be sure that you choose something that's real and relevant to your practice, because we want this to be a valuable experience, and hopefully you'll be able to use the information that you gain through your analysis, through your critical assessment in your practice as well, or have that knowledge base to build upon as you move forward. So, some key points to remember. Make sure that you cite both the article, the journal study that you've chosen, as well as the textbook. So you will need to cite the content that you pull from the particular research that you've chosen. As always, you have to cite your information. This is not new, this is not unique to this, but just as a reminder. And also, you want to validate your assertions or your decisions about the particular, your judgment on this assessment, on this critique, based on what you've learned in the textbook. And we're connecting those dots right now. So if your assertion is about part of a descriptive study and what the strengths and weaknesses are and what you've identified as a strength or weakness, you may want to cite your Merrill textbook that correlates with what indeed for descriptive studies are those strengths are weaknesses. So that's just kind of an example to help you. So make sure that you, as in the context of each component, if you use the information directly from the research, cite it. And also in each section, if you need to validate your assertions or your decisions on the research, cite that as well from your textbook. You can use additional resources, and that's perfectly fine. Please do so, but if you use resources, cite them. So please be just very diligent about reading each requirement, and this form also indicates the possible points, so kind of keep that in context as well. And remember, this is really, really important. This is not a summary of the research. This is you really reading it and critiquing the research and passing your judgment based on what you know and what you've learned so far in the course. So keep that in mind. If you have any questions, you let me know. So we're going to start out, and this is really a great structure to keep in mind as you move forward in your practice to discern the best evidence to apply in practice. So keep this in mind. You may want to keep the rubric for future reference as well, this form for future reference, to help you to really decide as you're practicing your critiquing, to decide the value of a particular research article. So we're going to start off from the get-go. We're going to go through the introduction, how that relates to your practice. And again, this must be real and relevant to you in your practice area or your areas of interest, because we want this to be valuable and not just an exercise in a course. We also want you to provide an overview of the abstract, meaning does the abstract provide the information that is necessary? Does it provide a good overview of the study? And you need to read the study first to determine whether or not the abstract is appropriate. So keep that in mind. Read the whole thing first, then you go back and start with the critique. You may have to read it more than once too. You'll want to indicate the primary objectives and aims or hypotheses. There's different terms that different authors may use. And if the true aim, objective, or hypothesis is appropriate and feasible for the study. When we get into research design, you want to identify the type of study. And from that, then you can glean what the strengths and weaknesses are for a particular study type. And was this type of study appropriate for the subject matter and for the population? All those types of things. So you want to really take that step back, and you're determining whether or not the author structured things in a way that is appropriate for getting the best information and congruent with the type of study, the structure for that type of study. So keep all those things in mind. You need to ask these critical questions as you're reading through your information or through the article. So does the study design correlate with the aims, objectives, or hypotheses? What types of controls or considerations were included? And really get into the details of the interventions or exposures that were measured. When we get into sampling, what was the type of sampling used? Was it appropriate? Ask all these questions and explain your rationale. What was the sample size? What was the configuration? How did they gather their samples? All of those questions that we've learned so far, those are the questions to ask. And is it appropriate for this particular study? And was there actions, or were there actions that maybe the researchers took that may have inflicted some sort of bias in the way that they chose their population? Does the population lend to any kind of ability to generalize? Very often studies are too small to generalize, but just kind of keep those types of things in mind. And also, is this something that can be generalized to your practice? And as far as data collection, how was it collected? Were there any inconsistencies? Were there any relationships to the participants that would be a power gradient? All of those factors, again, asking those critical questions in this tool will help guide you in doing those questions and going through the structures. So if there are surveys or questionnaires, were they gathered in an appropriate way? Were they gathered in a way that excluded certain populations? Were they only online? Therefore, certain populations may be excluded. All of those types of things are things to consider. Always ask those critical questions. I can't emphasize that enough, and this will serve you well as you move forward. We're going to dive into the bias and confounders, and remember that there are additional resources within the module to help you to identify specific biases, and just kind of also think about not only what is present in the study itself, but what is not present. Were there actions that really weren't displayed well, or may have you questioning what really happened, so to speak, if there's unanswered questions. So keep that in mind, not only what's present in the study, but maybe what is missing in the study as well. And then getting into data analysis, was appropriate for the study type? Were the methods used suitable? What kind of graphs or tools were included? And did they depict the data very clearly? Was it easy to understand? Did the data or the results clearly demonstrate the question, aim, or hypothesis? And did the authors try to guide or try to discern the data in a way that supports their question, aim, and hypothesis, and the data maybe didn't really indicate so, because very often in doing studies, sometimes some of the authors do try to get positive results when the data really doesn't show that they're really grasping for straws, so to speak, to prove what they set out to prove. So keep that in mind. And then with the study conclusions are that the results clearly and accurately displayed. Here we're getting into the same type of information. And overall, what are the strengths and weaknesses? Then let's take a step back and really look at the study overall. And we're going to be diving into our textbook and be very clear to indicate the absence or presence of the 9 components of Sir Austin Bradford Hill's causal association. So you want to include whether or not you were able to pull from the study that these factors were indeed or not in place. And if they're not there, that's perfectly fine. And that does happen. And really, in dealing with humans, because human life is messy, it's very difficult to have that causal association be very clear with one particular study. So again, we want to look at these factors, these 9 factors, as well as how that study in general applies to practice, and how does it correlate with what's already out there? Is there information that supports the same type of data or findings from the research? And again, as I indicated, it's very difficult to develop that causal relationship in one particular study, but the strength is there if there's, and that's part of the 9 factors, is if it contributes to what is already there. And just kind of reflect on the overall study, the quality of the study. Is it strong enough to change practice? Are the results generalizable again? And will you use this in practice? Let's get into your reflection. What did you learn? What do you need to work on? And it is perfectly fine to continue to work on. In fact, almost everyone continues to work on building their skills in discerning and pulling the best possible information from the data and from the research. So just know that this is an ongoing process, and having this basis or this foundation is really crucial. So let me know if you have any questions. Of course, you will have your reference list and proper grammar as you're writing, and of course citations. So let me know if you have any questions or concerns, but I look forward to reading your assessments or your critiques. Take care now.